Hi, this is Catherine, and this is Taking Tea with Catherine. This is the Bronte Sisters Black Tea Blend from, well, actually I was able to say that, from Simpson and Vale. It is a flavored black tea. It doesn't say where the black tea is from, but it has raspberry and papaya, marigold, I think, and something else. But those are the main fruit notes, fruit tastes. And it smells, not really taste, but it smells a bit fruity in a bubblegummy sense, which I do not associate with Bronte Sisters, but it is a nice tea, and maybe if I ever actually get back to reading more Bronte, which I was kind of doing this year, maybe I'll understand the choice a little better. Or maybe I won't, and I'll just say, well, it's good tea anyway. So, we're doing a little Friday reads / mid-month check-in, so I guess I could check in a little bit. I'm doing okay. I'm pretty much the same, and I'm still not reading at the pace that I keep thinking I should be, and that sounds weird because I shouldn't be criticizing myself, and yet one does sometimes. But anyway, I finished one book since my last Friday reads, which is fine, so I'll talk about that a lot right now, and I'm in the middle of 2 other books, and then I have one more to go for Springathon. Now, Springathon is one of my favorite things that have come up on BookTube in a while. I think it is such a good escape for those of us who are mostly indoors, as you can see from my very pale complexion and my probably widening of features right now because I'm not exercising the way I should be. But anyway, I have taken a walk at least every week, but I'm not doing half of the indoor exercise I should be doing. So bad. But, you know, again, I've whined about this enough, but I live in a city where I don't have my own access to any outdoor space at all that belongs to me. And I really don't live close to any nature apart from trees that are on people's block. Of course, the tree right in front of my building where I live is the one on the block that is leaning crookedly. So, of course, that'll probably be the first one to go, even though it's only 10 years old. So yeah, I can be a little frustrated because it is very hard for me to get to nature. I bought a bunch of, last week I think, a bunch of flowers and plants just to brighten things up. And then I found out I had to keep a lot of them away because some of them were actually ones that were considered toxic to cats. So I had to put flowers in faraway places, and my cats tried to get to them and knocked over things, and it was fun. So I realized that I gotta be a little more careful in my choices of shopping, be just more diligent, and just maybe stick to reading about nature. It's been good so far. The other purchase I made, which did end up taking up time, even though I bought it last week, I ordered it last week, got it this week, but took some time because there was some weird discrepancy between what my address was and what they said they could deliver to. It was a whole thing, and you know, nowadays even trying to call customer service is near impossible. I know people have more important things in life than having to deal with a little thing like that, but you know, what if it was important, like a medicine or something? You know, it wasn't, but it was a laptop that I got, and you know, I didn't need it for now, but I do actually, it actually will help my life get a little simpler because my old one is really old. And for me to actually make any phone calls, no, if you guys knew how I am with phone calls, it is a miracle that I even picked up a phone. So a little frustration. It took up a little bit of my reading time this week. I will use that as the excuse for not having read as much as I would have liked. That, and I'm working on another post that is a tea and history thing that I wanted to just do a little reading up on that had nothing to do with Springathon. So I ended up just pouring through a few other things, and yeah, so that was a slight delay. And of course I was watching some reruns of Law and Order and The Golden Girls because I'm home. Of all things, right? I think I watched some other things on television too, but those are the things that I meant that I probably didn't need to because I've already seen. But be it as it may, I finished Lab Girl, and I know that this is, by many people's accounts, a 5-star, one of the best books they read in a while, and I will not say it was one of the worst ones at all. But I gave it, not on Goodreads because you can't do half stars, but in my head, I gave it 3.5 stars, which does not mean that it's a bad book. I will probably hold on to it. Although I really should cull my collection. My books are just everywhere. OMG. But anyway, but I just felt like there were parts that I was really liking, but I got annoyed. So I like the parts about the trees and the development of trees. I learned things, although I will read more about trees and history and science stuff in coming months, hopefully. And I have done so before. So I did like that part, although sometimes I think it was maybe a little too much, but I still think it was good. And there were stories in the memoir that were good. I think the two main themes still of the book, and as it was summed up at the ending, I think it really was, especially Hope Jaren's relationship with her lab partner, who was basically under her the whole time, so it was like her assistant, really, not her. But anyway, they kind of had a partnership in spiritually, you know what I mean? Bill, I don't know if his last name's ever mentioned, but very AA. Through about 20 years of working together. And that's good. I did like that aspect of it. I don't want to say I'm relationship focused or personality focused, but it is interesting to say at least. I really don't like the lighting on my face today. Sorry about that. I look like a ghost, but you know what? I am actually pretty pale. Oh, it's quite hot out today. I went out briefly to take out the garbage, and it was hot and humid. I'm like, what month is it? But you see, the way I'm talking right now is kind of how the memoir was. It felt like, get to the point already. And I know from a little bit of a Google search about Hope Jaren that she is a highly regarded scientist. She has had awards, scholarships, all the accolades, discoveries, etc. that you can imagine. Maybe not all of them, but you know, quite a few. And I know that no one wants to blow their own horn when they're writing their memoirs, but it just gets annoying as you're reading that you never see the results. And I'll use a little analogy that I was thinking of because until it got a bit warm, I was doing more baking than usual. Can you imagine someone telling you a story about, or even showing you a video of baking and assembling the ingredients and the mistakes made on the way and maybe putting too much of this in or not putting enough of that, or running out of something, having to go back to the grocery store, having to get the pans and the stove needs to be fixed. You know, anything that goes into the process of baking, and then you get to the point where you put the pan in the oven and then you go on to another story. Now, if someone did that to you, whether they were telling you a story or they wrote about it or they had a video about it, wouldn't you be a little like, but how did it turn out? What were you actually making? You didn't even mention that. You mentioned flour, you mentioned sugar, you mentioned butter, but was it a cake? Was it cookies? What was it? And no, it's never mentioned. Never mentioned whether it even came out or did the house burn down. Like, what happened? And that's how this book felt for me. It was like there were so many times where, you know, there was a lot of description of putting together labs, which I found interesting, and certain bits about things that they saw and learned, which was good too, but not a lot about results. There was even a whole part about this real ill-fated road trip, very badly planned. Nothing about, okay, the deal was they were going to this place and they were going to argue about some paper. I don't remember exactly what it was, because who cares, because you never found out what happened, really. There was like maybe one mention of something that happened, and that was it. And you're like, okay, is it all about, it's not the destination, it's the journey? Is that the whole deal? Because it shouldn't just be that. And then obviously there was always the deal about needing more money, and I mean, her assistant, I guess, Bill, must have been very loyal to her, because there were times where, I mean, she always seemed to have a regular salary, even if it wasn't amazing, because she was like the professor in different universities and he was just like an assistant. But there were times where his pay was really bad, to the point that he was living in vans and stuff. And maybe he chose to do that, but I was like, man, maybe she's trying to make the point that scientists really need more money for what they're doing, but I'm like, why? What was the point of it? Did he just like that life? Some descriptions and, you know, the way she did things are a little explained later on when it's mentioned that she's bipolar, but it could have been mentioned maybe earlier, so you kind of understood that a little bit more. And then there's the other thing of constantly talking about how women have to fight hard as they don't get appreciated and they don't get the assistance or all the things that men do. You know, they don't get recognized the way they should, and how difficult it is to be a woman. And there was one example that I can recall, maybe two, but especially one specific one that was a really unfair thing that happened to her as a woman that would never, couldn't biologically happen as a man. And as, you know, to prove a point maybe, but I felt like it was just constantly mentioning, and I agree that it's true, but there were very few examples. So I'm like, as a scientist, you really should back up what you're saying. If you're claiming something, really show at least a few more examples. You don't have to make it all about that, but if you're constantly talking about, oh, a woman in science is not easy, and then you call yourself lab girl, I don't know. Again, I didn't hate this book. There were some parts that I found really interesting, but disjointed. There was a part where she was spending time in Europe, and she meets up with Bill in Ireland to do something, and it was okay. The story was okay, but at one point she just offhandedly mentions that they've been to Ireland numerous times before, at least she has, and I'm like, when did this happen? Because in the book, which is pretty much linear, there's no mention of that, and so I'm like, I guess it wasn't pertinent to the story, but it just felt like, when did this happen? And then there was, of course, in the beginning, she talks about her family, and occasionally she'll refer to her mother or whatever as the story goes on. But it seems like, it just seems like she was estranged or something from her family, but there was no reason why. And then there was almost no relationship with her parents or her siblings or whatever. And I'm like, what happened? Maybe you think that it's not important, but it's your memoir, and people are reading it. So I would say that if you just like to read memoirs generally about science, about trees, about laboratories, about geophysics, geology, paleobotany, I don't know, then yeah, this is still a good book. I did not hate it. 3.5 stars is not hate. It was like, but I just didn't find it the perfect book that so many people did. And, you know, that's just my opinion, guys. All right. So here's the books that I'm currently reading. And here's a memoir, and I'm being a lot more forgiving than I am with this one. Maybe because it wasn't raved over the way Lab Girl was. Pouring my tea, if you don't mind, for a moment. So sometimes when you go into something with fewer expectations, even the cover design and everything, it doesn't look like a book that is, you know, that everybody's talking about. So you just go into it expecting just and so when it's even more, a little more than you end up saying, oh, it's good. So that's Sheepish by Catherine Friend. 2 Women, 50 Sheep, and Enough Wool to Save the Planet. It is a memoir. Again, I love memoirs, especially about nature of any kind, and farm memoirs are such an escape for me because I barely stepped foot on a farm in my lifetime. I have been to some. I have been to farm museums even, which I know is not the same, but you know, I've been to the country. I have family that lives in upstate New York. They're not farmers, but you have to pass by farms, you know. So I'm not saying I'm 100% never been, but I'm very much, I don't know, a city girl, whether I like it or not. So I am happy to read things like this. Catherine and her partner Melissa open up, it sounds like a shop. They buy a farm. They bought the farm, and it can be pretty funny. I mean, there's a lot of parts about, it's mostly about Catherine and her point of view, obviously. She's also like a writer, and maybe does she work at a school as well, or is that Melissa? I get confused because they once in a while refer to going to work, which is, I mean, it's really hard to have a farm and just do that financially, but it's just, yeah. So I just don't know how they have the time, because there's so much time that goes into running a farm. But there was a part where Catherine talks about how she has this emotional breakdown about Elvis's death every once in a while. Something else could upset her, and suddenly she'll start crying about Elvis. I don't know why I found that funny, because I'm not even an Elvis fan, really. I'm kind of just about Elvis. I don't dislike him or like him, but I have kind of been like that before, I guess, about Freddie Mercury, so I will suddenly, out of nowhere, be like, Freddie Mercury's gone. But anyway, it's a lot about their, I think there's been other books that Catherine Friend has written about her farm, and So it's mostly about the sheep, which you could see. And sheepish refers to not so much the attitude of sheepishness, um, as more of her definition is being involved with sheep so much, and the upbringing of sheep, and the lambing situation, and wool. And she makes an effort. She's not a very crafty person, so she's making an effort throughout the book to learn about wool and spinning wool and knitting. So it's all the ups and downs with that. And yeah, also some sad parts, you know, animals that die, whatever, different adventures of that, and getting on a little bit in years. She's middle-aged, so it's not as easy maybe to do the physical things that one would do. So it's a good story. I don't know how many stars I'll give it because I'm not finished with it yet, but I feel like I'm more fair with this book than I was with Lab Girl, just because I didn't expect as much. But it's fun. It's not, I wouldn't say it's like fall off your chair funny, but it's good enough. And if you like to read about sheep, it's pretty good. If you're not, it's kind of, you know, they do sell sheep for meat. You know, they don't talk about that too much, but they are not a you know, vegetarian, vegan situation. There's a lot about ecology addressed in here, which is good. But so if you're sensitive about that sort of thing, maybe not. Maybe this is not the book for you. The other book I'm reading is The Secret Garden. I keep thinking it's A Secret Garden, so I get confused. That's why I always have to look at it. I am not well along in it, but I did have a good start, and I want to get back to it. And I was surprised because I just didn't know as much about this story as I thought. I know I'd seen an adaptation over 20 years ago, so maybe at this point I just forgot everything. I didn't realize how Mary Lennox starts out as such a not likable character, and I'm interested in her development as a person, so that's kind of cool. There are things about it that I could see, you know, reading it from a modern perspective is a little bit weird, but I do like the story so far, and I'm glad I'm reading another classic finally. So I think that's going to be it for Springathon. I wanted to do so much more. There's an Instagram kind of prompt challenge thing. Every day there's a different theme, and I've kept up with it, taking pictures of my books and my teapots and the whole thing that I do. So I'm kind of up with everything in that sense, but I felt like I was going to read even more. Unless I read a lot this weekend, I don't see that I'm going to read, or at least I'm not going to finish the other book that I had lined up, which is Mozart's Starling. I might start it, who knows, but I'm trying not to start any other nonfictions until I finish the one I currently have. So unless I finish Sheepish anytime soon, well, I don't know. But it's okay because you can't do it all. I don't feel like I've not accomplished this Springathon deal. I just think that it would be nice if I could just read it all. But I keep saying, well, I'll just spend the whole weekend reading, but I never do that no matter what time or I have. I always spend some time doing other things, and that's okay too. You know, one has to be a little bit balanced. At some point, the weather is supposed to be really, really nice this weekend, so I may just have to take a walk. You know, not too far, but put on the old mask. You just have to in Queens, you just have to. I went last week again for a walk, and I try not to go to the most busy parts of my neighborhood, and yet still people will walk right by you less than 6 feet. So gotta wear the mask, so that's a little, like, I don't look forward to my walks the way I used to, but I'm gonna try to be positive about it. I'm getting used to the mask more than I was. But you know, we gotta be grateful for what we have. And I am also enjoying spending quality time with my cats. As I've said before, it's really great. So I hope you guys are doing well. Let me know if you have read any of these books, what you think about them, you know. And if you agree or disagree with what I said about Lab Girl, I'm really interested. Obviously I don't want to argue, but like, to me, I kind of wanted to like it more. I didn't love it. And that's just how things are. So that's all for midweek / Springathon / Friday Reads, etc. Hope you're having a lovely day, lovely time, everything. Hope you're well. This is Catherine at Taking Tea with Catherine. Have a lovely tea and book-filled day. Goodbye.